Is it showing yet, Paul?
It's not showing on my screen. Does it look like it's recording at your end? There it is now. It is now, thank you. Okay, let's make a start. So welcome everybody to this Council of Governors meeting of Nottinghamshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust. My name is Paul Devlin. I'm the Trust Chair, and I welcome all of our governors who are able to join the call, non-executive directors, executive directors who are on the call. Welcome to anybody who is watching us, whether that's live or in what I call the catch-up that goes out onto our website. You're all very, very welcome. We do record this session because it's a part of our public accountability as Council of Governors, and we make sure that this is available to our public as one of the ways for us to connect back to the different constituencies of our governors. We've had a number of apologies for absence. I won't go through them all. I know that Lucy will make sure that those are recorded properly in the both in the register and also in the minutes of the meeting. I did want to say that we have one or two executive colleagues who aren't with us this evening for a mixture, I think for one through ill health, but others are taking some well-earned leave, and I think it's just really important for us to acknowledge. I know that our executive colleagues are very, very good at supporting and encouraging staff to take their leave. I think it's really important that our executive colleagues are also doing the same. Having said that, I know that we do have some exec colleagues with us who will be supporting us during today's meeting. And we'll also be being joined a little later on in the meeting by colleagues from our auditors, Mazars, who will be joining just to talk us through the annual audit item. We will bring those in at a later stage. And I think Dr. Nadia Valiala is observing the meeting, who is a trainee registrar in children and adolescent mental health. One of our governors, Palab, is her educational supervisor, and I'm really pleased that she'll be able to observe this meeting either with us today or afterwards through the recording. So I think that's all I wanted to say in terms of the apologies for absence. And if I could just ask, we have a register of interests that we keep. Could I just ask if anybody's got any specific declarations of interest in relation to today's agenda, please? If you could indicate by either raising your hand or in the chat bar. I'll pause for a moment. I'm not getting any indications. Thank you. In which case, let's move on to the minutes of our previous meeting, which was on the 20th of April. And if I could ask, please, for an indication of whether you accept these minutes as an accurate record, please. If governors, if you could give, if you could use the chat bar to put a Y or an N for yes or no, please, that would be really helpful for me. And I'll just pause while I give you a chance to do that. That's great. We're getting a good few yeses coming in now. Thank you. I think that will be plenty for us. Thank you very much. In terms of, if we move to the action, the rolling action log that was circulated, I think we've updated all of the items there, and items have either been closed or updated. The one exception, I think, is the annual plan presentation, which I think, Sarah, I think you are on the call. Sarah, is there anything further that needs to be done with the annual plan presentation? I appreciate you were off out of the trust for a couple of weeks.
No, Paul, thank you. The annual plan's going to go to board at the beginning of August.
Right, great, thank you. So we'll get seen again through that route. So if I could just pause to see if anybody had got any matters arising or anything indeed from the action points there that you wanted to raise. Just pause for a moment. I think we're getting quite slick at capturing actions from through the action log, and I think we've completed that. Okay, in which case let's move on and let's go to item 6, the lead governors report. Jim, if I could invite you to both introduce yourself and speak to this one, please. Jim.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Jim Aleander, lead governor, and this is my report to today's meeting. Before I go into the report, I'd just like to say how important council of governors meetings are. The collective opportunity for governors to carry out their duties, their twin responsibilities of scrutiny of the non-executive directors and representing public and members. I'm looking forward personally to the resumption of face-to-face meetings, in-person meetings, because after all, any kind of council is a social group, and it's been difficult this last year. And I think particularly difficult, Paul, I'll say, for new governors to both have an effective induction and to feel part of a social group. And so I'm just kicking off my report with the assurance that Paul and I and Shirley are all working closely together to ensure that as much in-touch representation is happening as is possible. And there's more of that later on the agenda. So into my report, I begin with an apology. I mentioned it was 2 months since our previous meeting. It's 3, of course, and I've had 2 house moves in that time. So probably the number 2 was in my mind. A lot does seem to have happened, and I'm going to be touching on, in particular, a virtual visit that a non-executive director, Sue Nixon, and I had, which is highlighted in this report as an example of the kind of thing that I would hope all governors, both those present tonight and those who've not been able to join us, will be able to do to get to know the services better. In our case, it was the involvement, experience and volunteering team. And I'd like to put on record my thanks, if I may, for the huge support they gave Sue and myself. There were 13 people in the virtual visit, and all of them had something important to say about the way in which the Trust conducts its business in involvement and in volunteering. I'd like to highlight, actually, I don't know whether Sue Nixon might agree with this, that I was particularly struck by the extent to which they go to ensure equality in 2 senses. I'll give you 2 examples. One's inequality in volunteering, because they will try to find a role within our great trust, our enormous trust, for almost anybody who can effectively contribute a volunteering function. And they've done their best to do that at various times as we've moved close to the end of the pandemic. And the other is the inclusion of all types of patients and carers in the support, the involvement and the experience, the consultation and that kind of effort. And I'd like just to signal to governors that I do think that team, there are others, of course, and we'll talk about those, but that particular team is one way in which any governor could play themselves in to an effective way of representing member and patient interests. Going on with the report then, Paul and I and the support team at the Trust have continued to have informal meetings, keep in touch meetings, and that's now been joined by our Deputy Lead Governor Benga, who has already contributed quite a lot of thoughts, knowledge and sense of direction to the way in which we're going to develop our business. One of the most I think, valuable meetings that a number of us attended recently was that the joint board, the joint board and governors meeting in June, which offers those meetings, although they have an agenda, are a more informal opportunity to engage and discuss issues of the day. And there's always a good deal of give and take. And again, governors who were unable to do that, there's one later in the year, dates have been set and are available. I think you'll find those, apart from anything else, a developmental opportunity to grow your experience of governors. And of course, that is a way in which the role of governors in holding non-executive directors to account can be best conducted. We had the other very important meeting we had recently was a Freedom to Speak Up meeting with SIMBI, and an instance of I think good governance there was the opportunity to start to shape the thinking. SIMBI Sabanda presented us with a very lucid description of the way Freedom to Speak Up, she's a guardian for that Freedom to Speak Up service at our trust, how that has developed. There was a good discussion, ideas were taken on board on the spot. And I think I was one of a number of governors who felt that when she showed us a video clip of how it was done elsewhere, although that may well have been good practice, what I drew from it was that that particular trust had something of a focus on relationships within the trust, whereas the way in which SIMBI was approaching it was to learn lessons from organisational success and failure. In other words, organisational issues which Freedom to Speak Up offers the opportunity to address. I'll also highlight from my report the growing relationship we're developing with the Sherwood Forest Foundation Trust, which runs Kingsmill Hospital in Mansfield, among other services. Thanks to Shirley Higginbotham for helping build the links I've got with developing with Sue Holmes, the lead governor there. And just to let you know, colleagues, that Sue and I had a catch-up call just today, and coming back to the value of in-person meetings, we have arranged to have a cup of coffee together at the hospital next Tuesday. And the chief execs and the chairs and the lead governors of those two trusts are working and indeed holding a meeting in a week or so on the issues around developing or involving governors in the emerging integrated care system work, the ICS. And I'll finish, Paul, with highlighting, successes. It's not often in the last 15, 16 months I've been able to use the phrase mind-blowing, but the involvement I was privileged to have in looking at the nominations for this year's Oscars was truly mind-blowing. And again, in signalling to governors who might be new or might well be established, how you might learn about the services of the trust. If you look at the finalists there and look at the innovative ways in which they continue to provide services for the patients and for the community, it was truly inspiring. And finally, I'll close on the note that a colleague governor, Anita, has been nominated for, shortlisted for an RCN Nursing Award in Leadership, and congratulations to Anita for that shortlist. I'll stop at that point, Paul, and be open to questions or comment or a wider discussion.
Thanks very much, Jim. I wholeheartedly endorse your last point about Anita's nomination to the National Royal College of Nursing Awards. It's a real achievement for her. And whilst the content of the award hasn't got anything to do with us directly as a trust, I think that we can we can stand alongside her in that nomination. So let me open it up for any questions or comments from anybody. There's a couple of things I'll say as a segue into my report after we've heard from anybody else. Let me just see. I'm not getting any indications. I don't think. Yes, I am. Steve Howe, please come in. Are you there, Steve? You may be on mute, Steve.
I'm having problems.
Yeah.
There we go. How's that?
Lovely, I can hear you.
Yeah, it's just something around relational meetings and timing. And I just wanted to highlight this because I see that there are big issues around this, and I have concern about it. One is that while we have lifting in restrictions on the 19th of July, there is not restriction on isolation until the following month. And there is a large expectation that the number of people that will have variant D will increase quite significantly. I have to add that I am double vaccinated, and right at this present moment, I am isolating with variant D. So my concern is the impact on the trust around isolation and the necessity to be really careful, because this could have a really significant impact on workforce. And my comment also with this is I would like to know what's being done about this from a trust perspective to mitigate this risk, because it is, I think, reading between the lines, it's going to be a very, very significant risk for the NHS, because we're looking at potential significant increase in COVID infections, but not significant deaths. And you know, I'm here and I feel like I've got man flu, guys, but you know, no more than that. But I'm worried about workforce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve. And just before I invite Julian to give a response, my and I'm sure all of our very best wishes to you in coming through this safely. And you're a real living example of actually this is part of the challenge. Julie Atfield, Julie is acting chief exec this week because John Bruin is on leave, and Julie and I, in fact, we were talking earlier today about this very thing, Steve, and there's been fast moving. Julie, could I invite you in just to give a really up-to-date response, please?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pleased that it's on the governor's agenda, because it's front and centre for us, obviously. So at the moment we have 200 staff off for COVID reasons. Now that's a mixture of COVID positive staff and staff who are isolating, and that number has grown quite significantly over the last week, or particularly 10 days. At the moment, we are not seeking significant derogations from our services, but we can see, you know, a level of escalation. So we have reinstated our incident control arrangements, and from tomorrow that will be in place again. Obviously, we're very clear about where the staff are and the impact that it's having on services. We know where the levels of greatest issues are. We don't have any inpatient outbreaks, which is a good thing, which is positive, that we've been able to maintain that. And she said we've only had outbreaks in one general health community team and some of the prisons at the moment. So we're keeping obviously a very close watch on all of that, and we will go into business continuity, I think, before too long, if that will continue. We're anticipating it will continue. We're very clear about all the IPC, infection prevention and control measures, and all of the PPE. There are no changes for us. So there's no, you know, I think people are aware there's no easing of any of that for us. So all of that will continue to be in place. We are working alongside other trusts, and I think nationally there's going to be some changes in direction with staff isolation, NHS staff isolation. People who are notified, for example, just by the app, we will probably be able to risk assess those people and bring a good number of those people back into work, but that's work in progress over the next few days. So You're right. It's an awful lot going on, and if it does continue at the pace and the scale, it will, given another couple of weeks, it will start to have, quite a considerable impact, particularly on staffing, and
Julie,
staff well-being is the other issue related to that.
Steve, do you want to just respond to that?
Yeah, if I can. My worry is that Julie's talking about an increase that's current, with current isolation and infection control management across the country. That's all being lifted on the 19th, and staff and other people will be together. So my thoughts are, unless there is some sort of, as you say, risk assessment, whether it be daily PCR or something to lift the risk on isolation of staff, we're going to have a staff crisis, and as is every trust in the country.
Thanks, Steve. You also
leave it at that.
Thank you. And actually this afternoon, I think in the last couple of hours, NHS England Improvement have released press statements about really reinforcing the messages that Julie has given to the council here. And I know that there is a lot of activity, not only within trusts, but as Julie said, between trusts, to enable us to manage this as effectively as we can. But Steve, I think you're very right to point to this having the potential for being very impactful in a negative way on our staff and on our services. Obviously, governors, we will keep you abreast of anything that does escalate on that outside of formal meetings. So thanks for that one, Steve. Let's see if I've not seen any other hands going up, and I think that was a useful sort of build on some of your report, Jim. And I did just want to say, Jim, that I totally agree with your reflections around it being particularly difficult for new governors, and actually by new we mean governors who've come in the last 13-14 months, because you've just not been able to engage with those services. And I know that you have frustrations. I know that some of our governors who've been in post longer than that, you've also got those frustrations too. I could see, for example, Derek is on my screen at the moment, and I know, Derek, you're somebody who has always felt the importance of getting out there into services, and it has been frustrating. And when we get to the later item on governor engagement, re-engagement, I think that we can have a bit more of a conversation about that. It continues to be in the context that Steve's outlined for us, I think. So okay, let me move on to our next item, if I can, which is my report. And there's just a couple of things that I'd like to highlight, if I can. The report basically aims to give a summary of activity that I'm involved in, and includes quite a lot of internal activity, most of which I won't go into detail on. I did just want to place on the record of the Council of Governors an important piece where John Bruin and myself signed the Armed Forces Covenant and the Step Into Health Pledge, which respectively are our commitment to supporting reservists and veterans who work for the Trust. But also the second part of that, the Step Into Health, is encouraging people who are in the forces but leaving to come and join us and work for us. And we had a really good session where, in fact, Jim, you'll be jealous, John and I were actually socially distanced in the same room, and were able to sign the documents. But we had support online from not only a veteran and a reservist who work for us, but also colleagues from the military supporting us on that. And there is video of that available if colleagues are interested in it. I did just want to flag that I think we probably, if we look back over my reports over the last year or so, there are increasing numbers of meetings that I get pulled into now in the system that Jim mentions, the integrated care system. And that is in line with the direction of travel of the white paper that had its second reading yesterday. We do expect there will be more of that. And I think we are being pretty forward thinking with our colleagues at Sherwood Forest, being able to think through how we can make best use of our governors and the Sherwood Forest governors as just one part of the engagement with communities in the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire integrated care system. So it's a good one to mention. And one thing just to pick up for governors is just a brief update that since we had the joint board and council of governors meeting that Jim mentioned, there's been some further work about the next steps of some of our constitutional review of, in part, the constituencies that make up our governors, which haven't been reviewed in many years. I've just been asked to update you on the fact that there is now being prepared a public consultation with both our public and our staff members on the on seeking views around some proposals around potential changes to the constituents that our governors represent, and that a plan for that consultation is being brought together, which then will include some timelines. It's not something that we are rushing at. It's really important that we do this as a well co-produced piece of work. But given that some governors were involved in some of the conversations on that at that joint meeting, colleagues wanted to make sure that I gave the opportunity just to update in this session. So again, I won't tease out any other points from my report. Happy to take any questions or comments either on anything I've said or anything that I didn't mention that's in the report. I shall just pause briefly there. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Am I seeing a hand? Yes, I am. Sorry, apologies. I am seeing a couple of hands up. Malcolm, I'll come to you first, and then Jim. Malcolm.
Thank you. When I read the report, I was just thinking, when do you find time to breathe? 10 meetings plus all the other stuff. I was just thinking that would just blow me away.
Thanks.
But I'm glad you're doing it.
Thanks for that, Malcolm. Yes, there are times when it is pretty non-stop, and I know my executive colleagues in particular will be thinking there'll be a little bit of tell me about it coming from some of our exec colleagues. But I appreciate the sentiment, Malcolm. Thank you. Jim.
Thank you, and thanks very much for the report. And Malcolm, you did brilliantly to steal my thunder there, because pressures on the non-execs, and Paul, forgive me, but you are a non-exec, are one thing. But I think we'll all be concerned about the workload growing and what it means for our executive directors and indeed the teams as a whole, as we move in that vital direction of a better integrated set of provisions. And from a governance point of view, Paul, I'm going to take the opportunity just to mention that several governors attended NHS Providers Governor Focus Conference last week, which was held over 3 mornings. I managed to get to 2 of them. And what was interesting, I went to mornings 1 and 3, and both of them had significant inputs on the integrated care system development and what it might or might not mean for governance. And at the moment, it doesn't mean anything in terms of having directly elected governors for the integrated care system. But it does mean that foundation trusts that are going into the integrated care system, well, governors in those trusts will have to have a review and a focus on their responsibilities going forward. And in that context, I just wanted to mention, and this is, I think, important, that between this meeting of the council and the next, there is going to be a consultation, a public consultation on the Guide for Governors, which is operated by NHS Providers, I believe. The consultation is due to start in late August and complete in September. And I just want to flag, if I may, Paul, the opportunity exists for both individual and perhaps collective responses by members of this council to what they would wish to see when that consultation comes out. Because what it's intended to lead to is a new section in the Guide for Governors on governance responsibilities in relation to the integrated care system. So that's one to watch for, and perhaps the admin team, our excellent admin team, and the steering group for the Council of Governors might look at how we might produce an appropriate response that reflects the interests of our Foundation Trust. Thank you.
So thanks, Jim. That's a really, really good flag for us, and we'll make sure that that gets picked up and that within whatever the time frame is for that, we'll seek a way of involving as many governors as we possibly can. I think that will be important. Okay, let's move ourselves on then. So the next point is the Chief Executive environmental scan. I've mentioned that John is away. He's actually away down in Cornwall at the moment, lucky for him. Shirley, I think you're going to steer us through highlights from the Chief Executive environmental scan. So Shirley, do you want to introduce yourself and the item?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Yes, Shirley Higginbotham, Director of Corporate Affairs. So I'm happy to take the highlights from this report. I'll take it as read and I'll highlight the bits that I think need highlighting, but you may want to ask questions about other bits. So for me, the key things are the CQC. So currently the trust is rated as requires improvement overall. We know the CQC have started their inspection programme. And we know they're looking at trusts who are rated as inadequate or are inadequate in their core services. Inevitably, that will mean that we are inspected sooner rather than later. So there's a lot of work going on within the trust, and obviously the governors need to be part of this at some point in preparing ourselves for that inspection. And I think when we say preparing ourselves, it's not about scripting it, it's about ensuring that all the governors are aware that's everything that's happening in the organisation and what we're doing about it, good and bad. So we will make sure that you are included in that. The next thing are the NHS-EI and their priorities. They are written down there for you. I think that shows you the amount of work that the trust is being asked to do on top of everything else. So we have got to get the services back to normal. We've already said, as Steve's pointed out, infection rates are going up and that's having an impact already on our staff. So we need to bear that in mind. And that's right across the system. That's not just for us. And then obviously the financial planning, we still haven't, as far as I'm aware, got guidance on what's happening in H2, which for everybody is the second half of the year. So it's just going to get more and more tough, and these are the asks from NHS-EI. I think the interesting thing about that is we are part of an accelerator system in Nottingham, which means we do get extra funding, but if we achieve 120%. I don't think they take it back if we don't, but knowing NHS-EI, they will ask some questions if we don't. So they're just a couple of things to put on your radar. If Lorraine was around, she'd be able to give more information about that. You've already really touched on this, which is the ICS becoming a statutory organisation from next April and shadow form from January. I think that will be a challenge. I think for the governors, I haven't heard about that consultation actually, Jim, so that's really interesting. So I think we do need to get ahead of the game. We are the only governors, Notts Healthcare and Sherwood Forest, and I think we can absolutely get ahead of the game and influence that. So I think when the consultation comes out, we need to make sure we're part of that. Trust-wide, these are the things we're doing. High priority areas, we know all our staff are exhausted. They've just gone through a tough winter and all the COVID, and now we're asking them to do even more. And again, this links back to their number of staff being off. We have got an excellent health and wellbeing package that we offer to all our staff. So that's the work that's being doing. The key thing I think is engagement. We are engaging across the trust, and we're using current methods and things that are already in place so that we're not impinging on people's time even more, because it all relates, doesn't it? It all comes back to the same thing, that we need to use the current channels that we have to ensure staff are very well informed and very well looked after. That's all I've got to say. Try hard not to ask me any really awkward questions if you can.
Any awkward questions are very, very welcome, and I'm sure Shirley will be adept at passing them on to somebody else very quickly if needed. So let's take another pause, because I know there's always a lot in this environmental scan. I think it's also quite challenging when, you know, papers inevitably get written over a week before the meeting, actually to keep them at the moment right up to date. Malcolm, you're the first hand that I've seen. Please come in.
Thank you. Yeah, just one comment really, and then a question. I was just reading community services, which is the division I work in, have not been inspected since 2014. We've been very lucky to get away with that. So I guess we're going to be, they're going to come shine a spotlight on us. So maybe we need to get ready for that. The question I was going to ask is there a good uptake by staff of health and wellbeing? I talk about it to staff members now. I just wondered if staff are taking it up.
Shirley, do you want to start? But Sue Nixon as well, you might, as chair of our People, Culture, Equality and Inclusion Committee, have a perspective. But Shirley, do you just want to respond to that?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. So I was going to say, Sue, as chair of the committee, probably has a, you know, it's how she gains assurance around that. So it'd be useful to hear from Sue. Sue,
are you able to shine any light on that? It may be that numbers are something we provide after the meeting. Sue? Are you there?
Hello,
Sue?
everybody. Hi, I'm Sue Nixon. I'm one of the non-executives, and actually I've only just taken up the chairmanship of this committee, so the numbers bit would be really good for me to be able to get to you after the meeting, if that's okay. In terms of discussing things at the meeting, we have been assured there's a good take up. However, we're conscious that we're not to be complacent and rest on our laurels, because we want to make sure that everybody, as Shirley has picked up, knows the routes and feels comfortable about using those routes in terms of taking up the offer, you know, whether it's courses, whether it's time to talk to people, whether it's finding somewhere that's safe to talk about other issues, and knowing, and absolutely knowing, how important it is, if they're feeling under the weather and not well, not to come in, because that's safe and caring for the rest of their teams, and to make sure that people feel that's okay to do that. But there's a whole range of activities, there's a whole range of support packages, and I'm happy to pick out some of those for you, and I will have to check back in terms of the numbers, but yeah, I will do that with the health and wellbeing lead. And of course, it's one of our priorities, as has already been mentioned with that. So I can't give you the numbers at the moment, but it is on our radar, and we'll be having regular update reports at each of our committees. So our next committee is in September.
Thanks, Sue, and we'll make sure that the corporate team can get that information out to governors. Shirley, did you want to come back on that?
I just wanted to say, so it's an interesting comment, Malcolm, that you promote it to your staff. So I'd like to ask the other staff governors what their views are. So is it out there in the organisation, as far as you're aware? So that's part of your role, I suppose, as governors, as staff governors, to understand that. So it'd be good to hear feedback from the staff governors. I'm sorry, I don't know who you all are by name.
Are there any other staff governors who want to give a comment on that? Anybody coming in?
Hello.
Hello, who's that?
Tess.
Hi, Tess.
Hi, I'm working for the communities team for local services city. There are a lot of staff are joining in the health program, and we were talking about it yesterday, and they're looking forward to start it.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if we've got many other staff governors on the call, but I think it's a really interesting question. Perhaps Shirley and colleagues, when the information about some of that take up goes out, it might be worth us putting a question in there as an ask as well. Just so we can ask governors to give a bit of feedback. I know you've got your hand up, Jim. Becky, do you want to come in on this particular item?
Yeah, thank you.
And then I'll come back to you, Malcolm, before I move on. Becky.
Just frantically looking for the paper because Tracy Orlandi, our health and wellbeing lead, did present to us as execs only in May around the health and wellbeing, not only locally but what we were doing at a system level. So I definitely know there's a present. Unfortunately, it's not in the papers that I'm opening, but I do know, if I remember rightly, the uptake has been more, Malcolm, in numbers that we've seen before. I think the offer we give is broader as well. And actually, we've got ability as managers and leaders to refer staff in as well. So if we felt there were members of staff that we particularly needed support, then we've got that ability to support them in that way if a member of staff didn't feel that that was something they could do themselves. So there's a whole range of activities. I suppose the other assurances, it's what we talk about at every single team meeting and listening at an event with our staff. So certainly within community health, we've run a number of workshops specifically on recovery and recuperation for staff. So really getting staff views on what good recuperation means to them. Sadly, perhaps a little that we might not recuperate before we get another wave of COVID, which I think is my biggest worry, in that, we've got very tired staff out there, and actually we know we're going to ask them to do it all again, potentially, hopefully nowhere near as bad as in January, but we'll wait and see. But certainly Tracy has got a report that she can present to you fairly easily with that detail on, but that's
Great.
sort of view from us.
Thanks, Becky. I've seen Helen Caldwell, you've put a hand up. Let's hear from you as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to chat about this. I was just in a professional forum today, and we were talking about the same thing, about how there's some really good wellbeing offers, like the mindfulness, etc. And I think something that was reported back, there's a challenge, is that clinical pressures sometimes take over. There's limited staff on the ground, and when something clinical needs to happen, the mindfulness gets cancelled. And we were talking about how it's really important to try and, if the mindfulness keeps you well, that's a priority. If the waiting lists increase, it's better for that than for you to be off work for 6 weeks in 2 weeks' time because you haven't had chance to have that time. So yeah, there are discussions around that and how we can help facilitate staff to go to attend, to free up the time to take advantage of the offers that are there.
Thanks, Helen. Malcolm, let me come back to you just to wrap up that piece before I move across to Jim. I think it's a really important point that you've fleshed out there for us. Any comment, Malcolm?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I weren't particularly too interested in figures specifically, just that staff are taking it up. I'm always banging on about it, and when people say, "Oh, I'm a bit tired," or well, go on, connect. Everything's there, and it was just a curiosity, really, I suppose. But it's brought out quite a good discussion.
It has.
And I'm always banging on about, you can't do your job if you're cracking up.
Yeah, great. You're a good champion of this, Malcolm. Thank you. So, Jim, let me bring you in. You've been waiting patiently.
No, I mean, that was a vital discussion, and without wanting to parody what Malcolm said too much, I mean, I think we'd all be delighted if all our staff governors banged on about it, Malcolm, because this is exactly what we need to promote the service that we've had described by Becky as an excellent offer. An offer is only as good as a take-up in any walk of life. My point was going to be slightly different, and thanks to Shirley for presenting the report. I just wanted to reflect for a moment, and I think this is relevant to the next year of our governance at least, that if we are likely to be inspected again, and if there are pressures all around the place, which we've just been hearing described, and if John is reporting a significant increase in demand on mental health services, and by the way, that's in the minutes of the April meeting too, then and dear Steve's point earlier, about the uncertain pressures of the pandemic, we, as a set of governors, I'm just floating a thought, colleagues, as a set of governors, we need to think about how we do our governance in the coming year, when all kinds of other pressures will be on the execs and the non-execs, whilst making sure that we keep following that path towards the holding to account of non-execs on the one hand, and vitally, I think, for this discussion, the representation of members and public. I wanted to say that because I always use John's reports as a basis for my thinking about where we might go next. And if we can hold those thoughts in mind when we get to the later item about our re-engagement strategy, you might want, for example, to highlight as governors how you might find out more about the actions around quality that the Trust is taking to ensure that when inspection happens again, that we come out of it as we'd all wish us to. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Jim. I think that's a good flag for us rather than a discussion point, and actually segues us really nicely into our next item. But really helpful conversation there, staff governors, absolutely encourage you to keep on having those conversations. What's really good as well is if you can feed back into the corporate team as well about the conversations you're having, because then we can log that. And I think if you can do that and feed back to Lucy, it means that we can then keep other governors up to speed on it. And indeed, it's not just for staff governors, as Jim said there, it's about us passing it out to all governors. So shall we move on then to the governor re-engagement paper? Shirley, we'll stick with you, please, for giving us a bit of a steer through this one. Shirley.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So again, taken as read, completely understand all governors and NED frustrations with not being able to connect directly with the organisation as they would wish to over the last 16 months. So hopefully this sets out a plan for the future of how we will continue to engage with governors. And one of the key things I know everybody's interested in are the visits and virtual visits. So Lucy has linked with all the divisions and asked them for all their priority areas where people would welcome a visit. And then we will work with governors to decide and agree how we will do that in terms of what priority areas we want to visit. I think it's important to remember that staff do like to see us. Becky and I were discussing this today. You know, staff feel forgotten as well, that people have not been out to see them. So it is important that we go and see them and acknowledge and recognise and reassure people that we do value the work they do. We're in really challenging times. So this is the plan. What I would say though, so this is the plan of what we're going to do to ensure you're engaged with the organisation. I think there is another side, and that is how you are engaging with your constituencies and the public and feeding that back. So, you know, I'm sure for those of you who don't go to the pub, there's some who go to the pub and some who don't. But when you're there, you know, conversation of how people have experienced our services is really a good way in, and it's an informal way in. And to feed that back in is also really useful. So I heard this and I heard that, and I know it's only anecdotal, but when we have enough, we can build a theme. So it's really important that when you hear these anecdotes and when you hear these stories, that you also feed that in. It doesn't have to be in a formal environment. So that would be my ask. This is how we will work to ensure that you are engaged. But my ask is that you also understand that the role is for you to feedback how, and we've just had that conversation, haven't we, from staff governors letting us know of the health and wellbeing offer, but for public governors too, when you're out and about, if people talk to you, it's really useful informal feedback. Yes, you Great. Need to go to the pub, Jim.
So thanks, Shirley. I know you picked out some highlights there. I think for me, it's worth us noting in the public domain that actually we have finally in the last couple of months been able to get some of those virtual visits that involve governors going, and I've seen the reports that come on the back of that from non-executive directors with input from governors, and those have already been really helpful for us. So absolutely encourage that. And I also know there's been a piece of work done to do a bit of proactive checking in with governors who may have felt like they've missed quite a bit and are feeling a little bit less connected. And it's really understandable. And I think I just want to give that commitment from us that we know that we need to be proactive in checking in with you as well. And we're working on that because I think that's an important piece, particularly again, Jim, for those governors who've joined us in the last year or so and haven't got the benefit of previous years of more face-to-face engagement. So I hope that this is a welcome paper. Let's just open that up for any comments or questions from governors. And again, with this one, any particularly if there are any of our newer governors who you feel like you've not had a chance to get out there and have engagement, does this give you a bit of confidence about the direction that we're doing our best to go in? Let me just open it up and see if anybody would give a comment. I'm not seeing anybody diving in to me. I'll just see if anybody else puts a hand up first, Malcolm, just because you've had a couple of bites at things. Yeah. No, I'm not seeing others. Malcolm, give us a reaction.
I thought I would. Nobody else would seem to want to do anything, and I don't want to take over the meeting. I did an actual visit to Rampton, which was really good. That gave me an insight, fantastic, and that would be nice. I think it's also nice for me as a relatively new governor. I think I've sat in a room once with Jim and other governors when I first got on. So I'm in my second year. So Microsoft Teams is great, but it's nice to sit in a room with someone and you can just chat and not worry about the technology failing or, development sessions I quite enjoyed. I enjoyed that last one. And I'm just looking through, because I tend to make notes and I rabbit on if I don't. There was just one thing that came out of that. Oh yeah, you'll like this one. But just a little aside, it was said that when they were talking about acronyms, one of the governors that were at this conference said that they had a chairman, or was it a chief exec? I can't quite remember which one. That if you use too much jargon, they used to ring a bell and you had to stand up and do a dance.
I can.
You like a dancing, Paul?
I could see the horror on some faces of my colleagues, but we'll note the sentiment, Malcolm. Thank you. Well, look, let's. I think the intent of this paper was very much to give governors some confidence that you have been heard around this, and that we are we have actually started to deliver on some of these pieces, and we will get the other pieces into place as soon as we possibly can, notwithstanding the landscape that we've talked about earlier. So thanks for that, Shirley. So let's move ourselves on, and I'm going to just present the issues log that we've got. And what I wanted to do, I think this is the first time we've brought the log to our public meeting. So I just wanted to say a little bit about the principles of what this is about. The intent of this is to enable all governors to bring into the trust any issues, ideas, questions that they've got, things that they've picked up from their constituency, and for us to have a process of being able to deal with those. And so what will happen is that if you as a governor have either an issue or a question, or indeed a suggestion or idea, if you feed that through to Lucy, Lucy can then log it in this log. We'll talk with you about, well, what is the desired outcome here, so that we're clear about what it is you're hoping for. She can then make sure that this is the best route for getting to that answer, because sometimes it might be that there's a more appropriate or quicker route to get to an answer. But more importantly, can then put that out to the appropriate part of the organisation. That may be a non-executive director as a committee chair. It may be that it goes to an executive director, or indeed a targeted team. And what I wanted to do was to make sure that we then bring into the public domain the responses and actions that have followed through on that, so that you yourselves as governors first off can see that there's been a loop hopefully connected of the issues that you've raised, but also you can see what your colleagues are raising, and we're doing it in the public. So I don't propose teasing out any of the specific examples there. It's more about us noting the log itself. But I'd really, really encourage you to be using this. And if you've just got a question and you're not sure whether it's right for the log, the best way of finding out is to pick up the phone to Lucy or drop her an email. And she will then be able to help you work out the best way of placing that idea or issue or question or concern. So anything that's coming through like that, please do bring them in. Jim, let me bring you in. So you may well be supporting me on this. And
yeah, well, yes, you've read that one, Paul. I'm exactly supporting this. I'm a great enthusiast for this, colleague governors. Any issue can be raised. I mean, I raised a couple a few weeks ago, one of which was really just a question. And in discussion with Lucy, the question was answered and didn't appear in the log. But the one that's in today's log, which was about suicides at a foundation trust in Essex, was serious and important, and it was worth flagging and getting assurance from. It brought up the link to our own suicide prevention strategy. I should mention, Paul, as well, that at the Governor Focus conference last week, and it may well have been a day that another governor was there, our neighbours at the Derby Foundation Trust were promoting their log for governors as good practice, and they subsequently submitted it to NHS providers, and I'll circulate that to Lucy so we can compare and contrast the way we record information and the way they do. But please do, governors, I'd encourage you now, particularly with a consultation on the future of governance as the integrated care system develops, just flag these things. And if you, and you should feel free, by the way, to flag them with me if you wish as well. We can do that either through our informal sessions, which were noted in Shirley's report, and a date for the next one of those will be circulated shortly. They can either be raised there or they can be raised by email or telephone with me. I'm very happy to take them any appropriate way. Thank you, Paul.
Great, thanks for that, Jim. I think, Derek, did I see your hand? Yes, I did. Derek, your hand's gone up. Derek, please.
Yes, thank you, Paul. As you noticed, I've got some questions on there. Firstly, I'd like to thank two people. Thank Lucy for actually helping me to actually frame it and get it into the right place. And I'd also like to thank Julie for the comprehensive answers to my questions. And it's just from a personal point of view, I'd just be interested in how this situation at the Priory is at the current time. If somebody could, I don't mind if it's not available right now, but if somebody could let me know, I'd appreciate that.
I'll go. Julie, is that something that you want to take now, bearing in mind we're in a public meeting as well, or follow up afterwards?
I can give a really simple, quick answer that's in the public domain. So the service is now able to retake admissions on a phased basis. They have put in place improvements and assured the CQC about the action that they've taken, and they have been re-inspected. Derek, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much indeed.
Great, thanks, Derek. And I think that's a really good example where, you know, you were able to raise a number of questions that then got dealt with through the log. And that's a very useful way of just flagging how we can build on the log in our public meeting then. So I'd really welcome this being one of the few papers that I would like to grow longer each time we have meetings. It's not something I say in our board meetings very often, but I think this is one where it's really, really good for you as governors to be using this as a way of influencing and also being able to have your influence seen by your colleagues and indeed the public and your constituents. Okay, let's move on. I do know that our external auditors have joined the call. I hope they will give me leeway to take our next item first, which is the performance assurance report. Stephen, if I can invite you to introduce this, obviously taking it as read as a report, conscious of our colleagues who've joined us from externally. So, Stephen, if you'd like to introduce yourself and the paper, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'm Stephen Jackson, Non-Executive Director and Vice Chair, and also in relation to this paper, Chair of the Audit Committee. This is the report which you should all now be starting to get used to seeing. I'd say we're still working on it, and hopefully each time we present it to you, it'll look better and be that little bit more meaningful. You can see that in this particular month we've looked at various different areas of assurance and different areas that appear on the BAF which were targeted and led to a series of actions. I'd remind governors that you know, this is to provide you with assurance of what the NEDs are doing in the various board committees, and this is by no means the universe of our activity, but it just highlights specific examples which show you the kind of thing that is happening. And of course, as governors, a key part of your responsibility is to hold the non-executive directors to account, and this is one of those ways that you can seek that assurance. I've given a few examples in the paper, which I think I'd take as read. I think the only thing that I would comment on is that we are getting a report from the auditor, so I won't talk too much about the trust's annual report from our external auditors, other than to say that particularly in terms of the audit committee and to some extent the finance committee, at this time of the year a lot of our work is around producing the final accounts, and there are a couple of things of note that I think do need to be flagged up. One is that the numbers that have been reported to us all on the monthly management accounts are those that appear in the final statement, so there were no audit adjustments, and that's a great credit to Lorraine and her team. And I think the other thing that's worth just highlighting is that our level of assurance from on the head of internal audit opinion rose one level to significant assurance. You remember those of you who were around last year, we talked about that. And it's good to see that coming through, particularly in responses to internal audit actions.
Okay.
And again, credit to Shirley and her team for achieving that. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. And it is a work, as you said, it's a work in progress that I know non-executive colleagues really are now focused on teasing out some highlight strong examples of assurance that's been sought. So let me just open it up to see if any governors have got any comment or question on this paper. I'm not seeing any. Can I take that silence as this is a useful paper that is giving us some good information around assurance, and we're content? Can I see if I can get any nods in the space? Yes, I am getting a few, which is good. I think that's really helpful for us because I know the non-executives really wanted to make sure that this was of value for you. Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing some yeses. Thank you very much, colleagues. In which case, let's move on then to the annual audit. Stephen, I didn't know if you wanted just to preface this with anything before we hand across to our colleagues from Mazars.
Yes, I must say I'm pleased that Mazars are here today, and that you as governors have got the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have directly. I should say that I'm very pleased, not to say a little proud, of the way in which our external auditors and our internal finance team have collaborated together to get a clean audit report to deliver the numbers on time and in such a manner, in using no personal visits. I know we were talking about the impacts of that elsewhere earlier. This has all been done virtually, and I think it's a great credit to all of those that have been involved. The accounts have been reviewed by the audit committee, and I commend them to you. But I'm sure that Mazars or myself or any of my colleagues are happy to take any questions if you have anything.
Great, thanks, Stephen. In which case, let's welcome Mark Surridge and John Pressley. I'm not sure if you. I know that the presentation has been circulated. I don't know if you want to take us through that or how you want to present this, but if I can invite you both in, please.
Thank you, Anne, and good evening to everybody. And thank you, Stephen, for those kind words up front. I'll confirm that we do remain independent and objective despite the kind words. So whilst they're very kind of you, obviously it's really important that you as governors are assured that the work that we do provides the overall scrutiny and challenge that should be expected of an external auditors. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have in relation to the work that we do. And I do appreciate that it can be quite technical. So please don't be afraid to ask any questions whatsoever. And it's really key for me that you do get something, some benefits out of this. We did have some slides that were around. I'm not sure if they're going to be shared on screen. Otherwise, we'll just talk them through briefly.
I know that they were circulated in advance, Mark, so I think you can talk them through.
Okay, excellent. So I'm here today with John Pressley. My role, and I have been to the committee before, but just in case there's been elections changed just through the year, it's my responsibility to sign the opinions on your accounts. And I do so through the work of the team, and it really is John and the rest of my team that really put the legwork into what we do. The slides that we circulated gave you our pictures, but it also tried to give you an idea of the scope of the work that we do, who it's reported to, because I think that's important for you as a committee to understand the route of reporting and the technical nature of where it goes through, so that you understand we do more than just come and talk to you once a year. We've given you some slides about what our work covers, and that's hopefully quite a broad range of matters, and also the outcomes of where things are at. I'm just going to ask John to pick up and just talk you through a few pertinent points. I did see he had accepted and was in the lobby, but it's difficult to see.
I am here, Mark.
He is there. Brilliant. Okay, over to you, John.
Thank you. I'll take the report as read, but just to sort of highlight the three elements of our work. One element is giving an opinion on the financial statements, and on the 11th of June we gave an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, saying that in our view they were a true and fair view with regard to the financial position of the trust, and have been properly prepared in accord with the guidance and the requirements of the NHS Act. So that's one element of our work in terms of financial statements and taking a look through the detailed figures. And I would like to thank Lorraine, Jane and the team for all their help and support in helping us finish off our audit on time. It's worked well this year despite the remote arrangements. Another element to our work, which isn't quite complete yet, but I have no significant findings or significant weaknesses to report, is in relation to value for money. The guidance of this work was updated by the National Audit Office on the 16th of April, and they've revised their reporting deadline for this year for VFM to the 20th of September. We will, however, be sorting out our report on value for money much earlier than that, and indeed we'll be sharing the outcome of this work with the Audit Committee in July, which is coming up shortly. And once this is completed, we can share the report with you as governors. Suffice it to say, at this juncture, we do not believe that we will be flagging any significant weaknesses, and provided things go as we anticipate, that will be again another clean bill of health. We also have some wider powers with regard to any issues of concern that we may experience in relation to complying with legislation, or for that matter, the financial stability of the organisation or the behaviour of management. We haven't exercised any of those wider reporting powers that we have because we haven't needed to do so, and long may it remain the case. So in a nutshell, for want of a better expression, it is a clean bill of health as we envisage it, and I would like to turn back to Mark to say a few more words before opening up for questions.
Certainly, and thank you, John. Again, for the benefit of governors, John's absolutely right. You know, this is a clean position. There's some work that we have to finish off by issuing some reports, but we don't envisage anything that we really need to bring to your attention or highlight. But I think it's also useful just to give you a bit of context. So obviously the guidance notes that came out late has affected every single NHS organisation. That is not a feature of yourselves in any regard. It is a result of late guidance that's come through. You do have a clean bill of health on the financial statements. That is not the case everywhere. There have been some issues. What I'd also say is when we issued the work on the financial statements, we also, as part of the work through the audit committee and getting into the detail, we provide recommendations around controls, or we might look at adjustments in the financial statements. I think what's helpful for you is that obviously we take that, we have the discussions with management and the audit committee, and in terms of the quality of financial reporting and the quality of the internal financial controls, there's absolutely nothing that we need to bring to your attention. So that is again a good position to be in. And again, I can assure you that is not the case everywhere. So I hope you find that context quite useful, and happy to take questions.
Great, thanks Mark, and thanks John. And you did preempt me wanting to invite you to just do a little bit of a putting it into the context of actually this isn't how it is for every trust across the country. So I want to open it up for comments. Jim, if you forgive me, let me just see if there's anybody who's not spoken yet who wants to come in, because I think it's one of your key roles as governors is to appoint our external auditors, and actually this is an opportunity for you to get a sense of okay, what's coming back to you. Is this making sense to you? I think when Mark introduced it, he was saying some of it is a bit technical, and it is, and it needs to be as understandable for you as governors. So I just wanted to see if there are any other governors, particularly perhaps some of those who've not yet had a chance to speak out, or some of you newer governors for whom it's the first time you've seen a report like this. If there are any questions or comments you've got, I'm not going to sort of point at anybody or pick on any names, but I just did want to open it up briefly before I bring Jim in as lead governor. Anybody else want to come in? Jim, do you want to give a response or question, Jim, and then we'll see if anybody wants to come in on the back of you, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I would like you. I would welcome any comment, no matter how open, from other governors that explores the issues that might arise here. First of all, thank you both, Mark and John. I'm Jim Aleander, lead governor, and it's great to know we've got an unqualified audit opinion. I'd like to say we look forward to the value for money work outcome that you're doing. My question, it is a question, is about something that is noted in your report and on which I'd like, if possible, to seek some assurance, and that's the area of financial sustainability. Earlier in our meeting, we've heard about enormous pressures on our trust, and of course we are an enormous trust with a very substantial revenue and capital budget. I'd welcome a comment from either you, Mark, or you, John, about looking forward, because financial sustainability is about whether we can deliver our plan, isn't it? And if fellow governors could have some assurance at this point about what you've seen that signals our sustainability, that would be very welcome.
Mark, John, do you want to give a response to that?
Certainly, I can give you a twofold response on this one. The first is, as part of the value for money commentary that we issue, that is a report that will come to you as a suite of governors. And within that report, you will see our observations around the effectiveness of the trust arrangements in terms of financial planning and financial control, as well as various other aspects. So you will receive a rather a larger and more sweeping report. What I don't particularly want to do is go into the detail of that today, because it's right that the audit committee receives that first in order to ensure it understands our findings and has the chance to scrutinise and challenge that appropriately. So that's a sense of some of it you have to wait and see. The other part I would say is that, as with any NHS organisation at the moment, whether large or small, one of the biggest challenges is what's the funding going to look like in the long term. With the first half of 21-22 locked down as a continuation of things as they are, it's what happens beyond that is a little bit uncertain, and that puts every trust in a difficult place. What we do know is obviously the trust is contributing with its financial plans within the integrated care system, and is working within that broader system envelope to help the entire financial system, the entire healthcare system operate effectively. I think it's not without some risk, because that's risk around certainty. So until there is certainty over the the medium and longer term financial position, there's always going to be a level of risk associated with it. But the trust does have a board assurance framework. It does have a board and a non-executive committee. It does have finance and performance committees that continue to and are monitoring that situation. I think I can't say much more than that until we've issued our report, I'm afraid, because it would almost jump the gun a little bit.
I think that's really helpful, Mark. And Jim, just before I bring you back in, I'd just like to invite Trevor, chair of our Finance Performance Committee, to see, Trevor, if you want to comment on that from the non-executive assurance perspective. Can I invite you in, Trevor?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Trevor Allman, non-exec director and chair for Finance and Performance, as Paul mentioned. Jim, that's a very good, challenging question. One of the things I think you should feel comfortable about, one is we have an internal audit process. We have an external audit process. Both of those reviews that conduct regularly and formally annually give us both good, solid assurance that independent views of our position and sustainability is valid. There's always the risk that we look internally and convince ourselves everything's okay. So having external bodies look at us and internal independent bodies is really crucial. Through our F&P, one of the primary goals of us is to make sure we manage our financial performance, we manage our cash position, but equally one of the challenging issues that we have is that we're in constant dialogue and connection with the government, because obviously we're a body dependent on what the government allocates to us and controls us. So I have every confidence that the mechanisms and the processes that we've got allow sustainability. Our challenge is to try and keep one step ahead of what the government dictates are on us. And if there were one area of risk that is out of our control, that would be it. And it's been very evident, Jim, during the COVID scenario, where we've been allocated funds to actually support our investment in COVID. But the guarantee only comes through after we've spent the funds, and we then have to make sure we claw it back. But in a financial stability and sustainability position, I think the governor should be assured that whilst history doesn't predict the future, the history of our financial management within the trust is excellent. And there's no reason that there should be any doubt that we should look forward with that same level of confidence.
Thanks, Trevor. Jim, let me come back to you just in response to what you've heard from both Mark and Trevor.
Thank you. And again, if other governors are listening in on this, please, if questions arise, do raise them. Trevor, that was really helpful, and it situated Mark's comments within the trust. And in my 2 years with the trust as a governor, I've been confident in the processes and systems that are applied. And Stephen's always given excellent reports on the role of audit. It was a difficult question, Mark, and I suppose I say sorry a bit to you because your work is incomplete in this area. From the governor's point of view, I suppose the issue is just to keep an eye out for this because it will go through due process with qualified and competent people both at Mazars and within the trust. But alongside everything we've been hearing today about the pressures on our community and the trust response to those pressures, we'll need to have a watching brief on it and relate that to the board assurance framework, perhaps for our autumn meeting, if that's relevant. I'm thinking here of what Stephen and Shirley and Paul might see in terms of the update we get later in the year.
Great, thanks, Jim. Let me see. Anybody else want to come in on the back of this piece whilst we've got our colleagues from Mazars here? Paul Longhorn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Paul Longhorn, Public Governor. Just a question: has financial provision been put in place for a worst-case scenario after the opening up of the 19th of July?
That's a great question. It's probably not one for our external auditors, I don't think. But
the reasoning behind it is that, as you know from previous meetings, I volunteered to vaccinate, and I've been vaccinating since May, and I've been in and out of clinics daily since then, and speaking to the staff and the medics around, and no one feels very positive. That I haven't met anybody that thinks this is a good idea, and we're all expecting a huge backlash. So I assume the trust is expecting that backlash as well, or the information has got back, and we're all really worried. So I just wanted to get an idea of the trust and their position on this.
I certainly share that worry. Trevor, I wonder if you're able to bring a non-executive perspective, and then Julie, perhaps given that unfortunately Lorraine isn't able to be with us this evening, whether you just want to give a response from the executive side. Trevor, let me invite you back in.
By all means, thanks, Paul. Another good question. What I would say is I would rest assured, Paul, that the way the financial system with trust works is we will manage our funding and our business performance in line with our goals and targets and budgets, as you would expect any trust or business to do. And we do that, as you've heard already, we do that very well. In terms of the impact of the unknown quantity impacted by COVID, that's a separate issue that's managed directly with the government. So that the government know that we're going to hit financial issues that we did not plan for, and we have not necessarily got plans for in the future. But I wouldn't put that as either a risk or a concern for the trust, because we have commitments from the government that they will reimburse us for the expenditure that's directly attributable to COVID. So it will not detrimentally impact what we need to do as a trust. It's almost a loan, almost like a loan in arrears, that we're working with a commitment from the government, where we know they'll allocate a sum of money. We may spend more or less than that. If we spend more, we will have to validate where we've spent that money, but it won't negatively impair the rest of the way the trust operates. And every trust and every a hospital organisation in the country is under that same jurisdiction. We're dealing with an absolute unknown quantity, so we're almost reacting in arrears, but that debt will have to be covered, and it will have to be covered by the government. There is no option to that.
Thanks for that, Trevor. Julie, do you just want to add anything from the executive perspective?
Yeah, so in broad terms, it's as Trevor described. I think there haven't been any indications that the financial regime in H2, or half two as we call it, is going to take into account a surge or a level of activity that's perhaps anticipated now. In terms of the vaccination programme, that is all being very clearly worked through across the system about how that will operate and how we manage flu and the vaccination programme this year. So that's not just out with this organisation, that's a system issue that is obviously being worked through, and there will be very clear arrangements in place, and that will be, it will obviously be funded. It's just, it will not be as it has been, I think it's fair to say, because the arrangements need to sustain a new programme. I think that, you know, as an organisation, we're very clear about, though, what position we'll take as time moves on. If we need to do things that cost money on the grounds of quality and safety for our patients and our staff, though, that will take priority. Notwithstanding, you know, our financial position, but I think we trod that well last year, and I think that approach would stand again. But that would be my view.
Yeah.
Paul, do you want to just respond to that?
Yes. I was just wondering, is there any budget or way that the trust can try and educate the public, or is this the government's responsibility? It's just the fact that the general message is that the public are just completely unaware of the risks at the moment. We as vaccinators are actually trying to tell people you can be doubly vaccinated and you can catch COVID. If you get symptoms, you need to isolate. And well, yes, as Steve is waving now, so yes, exactly that. Because people think that even after the first vaccination, they're immune and they go off. Just recently, I vaccinated someone who was having his first vaccination. He was going to Nigeria on holiday for a week, and I had to explain to him that he'd have no resistance at all, and he was probably likely to bring something back from Africa with him, but he was still going ahead with his trip. And I get it time and time again, and I just wonder if there's anything we can do, or because the government are giving mixed messages, that actually Boris just wants to tell everybody it's going to be wonderful on Monday, and we're all shaking our heads in disbelief and trying to tell people actually this is just the beginning almost.
Yeah. I'm seeing a number of wry smiles and nods, Paul, coming your way. I do know that we take every opportunity in all of our services, and particularly in our community services, to engage with people. And some of the work that we've led around the vaccination program, and then the targeting where there's been low take up, has been really effective. So the vaccine bus, I'm really proud that one of the things we did as a trust was lead on analysis of the data that we'd got around who was being vaccinated, and being able to triangulate that data with demographic data. And particularly across Nottingham City, that enabled us to take the vaccine bus with colleagues who were really skilled at having conversations with people who had concerns around the vaccine. And it's a very sort of a direct piece of it. But you're right, there are some real challenges. You know, we've not talked about the amount of misinformation on social media, which is another big factor, and we just have to keep going at it. I think what I'd just like to sort of tie that up with just underscoring Julie's point there about you know, notwithstanding that we've still got our external auditors on this part of our meeting, you know, quality and safety trumps the finances, and you know, we will not you know, we will not be taking risks around our quality and safety. If we can avoid that, it's really important for us. But Paul, I think that you have highlighted concerns that are shared pretty widely across the NHS about how the next few weeks potentially could develop. I would love to be able to come back to you in 3 months' time and say, oh, weren't we really wrong on that? I have to say I don't feel confident about that at this stage, but as a trust, all of our staff and all our services will be doing our very best around that. So thanks for raising the issues, Paul. Anybody else who wants to come in on the back of all of this? Let's just sort of pull ourselves back to the fact that this was with our external auditors, and in which case, Mark, John, anything that you want to say as a final comment for us as a trust before we thank you for joining us? Mark, I think I invite you in.
I was just going to say no, but thank you.
That's great. Well, good to see you both. Appreciate you joining us at this sort of time of the day as well. And we look forward to the value for money piece of work getting completed, and us making sure that we can inform our governors on that to the best possible ways that we can. So really appreciate you joining the call. Thank you. Governors, all that we were left with was any other business. I haven't had anything notified in advance. What I'd like to do, as I've got Shirley waving at me. Shirley, what did you want to say? I've got a couple of wrap-up comments. Shirley.
Oh, sorry, Paul, I might have preempted what you were already going to say. So I wanted to say it's really important that all governors contribute to meetings such as this. So there's obviously barriers to some people wanting to speak, and it'd be useful to understand what they are and how we can address them. So I don't expect you to say what they are now, because obviously that's the barrier. But if you could either email Lucy or I, and Lucy will be doing some work to understand what those barriers are and how we can, ensure all voices are heard, because it's really important for all governors to play their role and to be vocal in this environment. So just to say that is a piece of work that we will be doing. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And that's certainly complements what I was going to say. I think we've had some really valuable conversations this evening, and they're important for us. Jim began his piece by really underscoring the importance of the governor role, and for me, if there's things that we can do better to enable you as a governor, particularly for those of you who are new to being a governor and perhaps still wrestling with, well, what on earth am I supposed to be doing? Please raise those questions with us, exactly the way that Shirley's just outlined there. Because if there are things that, if a part of it is, well, you need to present things in a different way, if you can tell us that, we can feed that through. If it's about how we invite you into the conversations differently, how we frame the conversations, it would be really, really valuable for us. I hope that you continue getting that sense that we are a trust that absolutely values the contribution that governors do and can make. And it's important for you to influence, to challenge, to question, and to really inform what myself and the non-executive directors are doing. That then helps us hold the board to account as well. And there's been some really great things that have come out of the conversations here. It's just a really urging you to bring in any of those experiences, and anything where you can say, you know what, it'll be easier for me to speak in a meeting if whatever. And please don't hold back on that. Do feed that back through to Lucy. And as I say, I know that we are coordinating some more proactive engagement with you, just to keep on checking in, and that can be a part of that conversation. And I wouldn't want anybody to feel like they've been got at in that. It's really very much about wanting to encourage you and say that we absolutely welcome your contributions. Helen, do you want to just respond to that?
Oh, I was just wondering whether you guys had any forewarning or foreknowledge about when the social distancing guidance for hospitals might be changing.
The only thing I saw this afternoon, and I'll ask Julie to come in on that, was a confirmation that it isn't.
Right.
So I don't think there's any sense of, oh, it'll be in X number of weeks. The sense I got was that it was a restatement that we are not going to drop that. And certainly, I have to say, at the moment, I would want to wait a good while in terms of our trust before feeling confident. Julie, I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add to that comment from that question from Helen.
No, Paul's absolutely right, Helen. All the indications are that it won't be changing for the present time, and I think the risk level underlines that really. So the strong message has been no change.
Lovely, thank you.
And Helen, we will. Everybody, we all know that this is incredibly fast changing, and we are very alert to making sure that we keep governors in the loop. So, as and when the stuff that we keep hearing settles, because sometimes we can get a few different messages within a day. We have to make sure we've got to a final version of that. But we will make sure that we keep governors in a timely fashion engaged at an appropriate level. But thanks for the question, Helen. Okay, everybody. Our next meeting of the council is the 12th of October. There was a question earlier on about when we might be starting to move back to face-to-face. I'm in a space at the moment of I would love it if we were able to meet face-to-face by the 12th of October. I'm not sure I'd put my house on that at the moment, I have to say, but be assured that if it does become safe, we would work towards that. But I think we may still be on this format. Lucy, did you just want to come in before I close the meeting?
I just wanted to come in, Paul. I didn't know whether you were going to remind about the AGM next week on Thursday. It's the AGM and AMM.
Thank you. That's Lucy very gently reminding me of the reminder that she sent me through earlier on. So yes, thanks, Lucy. Our annual general meeting is next week. It's something that's really important if you're able as governors to be at, because it's a really important formal place. And I know that Jim will be preparing his contribution to that. And it is there are some formal pieces that we have to do as in the AGM, but as a trust, notwithstanding that we're having to do it virtually again, we want to do more than that. It's about us actually presenting something new out there, something good out there to the public, to give them a sense of how our year has been. And just to say, I appreciate there's been a couple of new governors who commented that actually they didn't, on this occasion, you've not spoken up because you didn't have anything additional to ask, which is really helpful. And again, I think if you can feedback that to Lucy as well, that would be really helpful, just so we get that bit of a sense from you all. But yes, please, Lucy, perhaps you could make sure that another reminder goes out with all the details about how to join the AGM, so that all governors are able to be part of that. And again, that's something that I do hope that before the end of my term of office, we've done at least one AGM in person, because I won't have done yet. Okay, look, thank you very much, everybody. I won't keep you here any longer. Really appreciate you being on the call. Steve, get well soon. Everybody
Yes.
else, stay safe. And I look forward to hopefully seeing as many of you as possible at the annual general meeting next week. Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.